And the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me try to get this moved. Okay, wonderful. Um, all right, so the only thing that I didn't mention in my little bio was that my main job right now is a mother to my daughter, Della, who is just turned 2 years old. So it's definitely been pretty challenging with everything going on with coronavirus because her school is canceled. So right now I'm trying to work and raise my daughter 100% of our days, and her father is working outside of the home. So definitely been challenging. So when I wrote and put together this presentation today, I really thought about all of my past experiences in schools and working with families and children with special needs. But of course, I didn't really put a whole lot in about working during a pandemic because I've never had any experience like this before. So definitely some new territory that we're on. The objectives that I wrote for today was to just familiarize everyone with some strategies to discuss special needs with families, and then understanding the family adjustment period and building that trust, guiding parents through the referral process, an IFSP or an IEP, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is. And then just to evaluate classrooms to make sure that they really are inclusive for parents and for children with special needs. Now, this topic is really near and dear to me. It was the topic for my thesis in graduate school because it was something that I really struggled with as a new teacher. I felt like I didn't really have all of the tools and I couldn't successfully handle children with special needs as part of an inclusive environment as a new teacher. And the Head Start program requires that 10% of all enrollment is children with special needs. So out of that 10%, we usually went above and beyond at the Head Start that I worked with in Wayne County. So we always had many children that had special needs in the classroom, a true inclusive environment. So I knew that in order to continue as an educator, I really had to learn how to work better with children with special needs and especially their parents, because that's where I felt like there was a big disconnect. So I sought out a lot of professional development over time and became more comfortable working with these children and their families. So I really wanted to share that today. And I have some steps outlined for each of you that really helped me to work with children and families better, but it's important to understand that each child is an individual and each family is going to have their own challenges, and that each program might already have a referral process that's in place that educators really need to become familiar with. But hopefully today, you'll understand if those policies and procedures aren't really working well for you, and you can have some new ideas how to make changes or discuss the need for changes in your program. So I have 5 steps here, and we start with relationship first. And I think that's just so important because we really have to work on day one, making sure that we see children and their families as individuals and trying to build a bond with them. So in Head Start, we offered home visits. So we were able to go into homes before school even started to meet with the family. And that was just a great opportunity to be able to sit and talk with families. And we had lots of different tools available to us to ask different questions to get to know them, but really making sure that we shared a human connection, a personal connection. So greeting people by name, making sure that we try to find a common ground on something, asking families and making sure that you're looking them in the eye, not just writing down notes, and asking them what their goals are for their children and what their fears are and if they have any concerns, and being able to start your conversations right there on that first meeting. So we're working really hard to make sure that we have this relationship, and we're going to build on it day to day with lots of different communication strategies. Now in this COVID world, that's going to look pretty different, whether that's going to be emails, different video applications. Phone calls still are really great. I've used that with many students in the past few months just to kind of check in and have more of a personal connection. So we're working on that relationship, and then you want to share your observations of the child with the family. So during this observation period, you want to make sure that you gather lots of factual data. What is the child doing? What times of day? What are you noticing? What's being said? What's being done? You want to gather as much information as you can. And then you want to discuss with the family different assessment tools. So if you're not currently using any of these, then you really want to be familiar with some and become familiar with them. Some of the common assessment tools that we've used in Head Start was the Ages and Stages questionnaire. And I just noticed that when I took my daughter to her 2-year wellness checkup, the doctor gave me an Ages and Stages questionnaire to fill out. So some things to know about that is it's just really easy to use. You don't have to have really any training to do it. It's just a questionnaire. Does your child do this? Yes, no, sometimes. Or I might say not yet. It's really easy to fill out for families and for teachers. Now, you don't have to use that one per se, but it's just one that I really like. And it comes with a lot of great tools that you can use as you go on with the assessment. So thinking about what kind of assessments your program uses, are they working for you? Is there other options that might work better? I think that it's also really important too, having the parents complete an assessment such as the Ages and Stages. That gives you some results that you can compare. So if the teacher fills out one, the parent fills out one, then you can have a real discussion and opens up dialogue between the teacher and the family. And it shows families that their input is really valued, and it helps to get to step 4, which is obtaining permission. So we would never want a family to feel blindsided with a discussion of special needs or developmental delays. So making sure that you have really good open communication throughout this whole process is vital. Once we do get to obtaining permission, that would be after you were talking to families about all of those observations and concerns, sharing those results. And the assessment tools can really help with these conversations by having more data to back your observations. So many assessments have the next steps in them as well. So going back to this ASQ, it has activities for families to do at home to practice in each area of development. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about that in the next few slides. But once we've completed these steps and the work is done, you need to know that it really is just the beginning. So once we've had these conversations and try to help families understand that their child might have some delays, some special needs, or even a disability, we need to be there to be able to offer support. So many families have a particularly hard time understanding how this educational journey might be different from what they've expected. And that's why I found these 4 levels of awareness that I think is really important to talk about when we're talking about working with these families that are just now starting to understand what's going on with their children. So the first, as parents become aware of the impact of their child's disability, there's 4 distinct levels that have been observed. So we have, number 1 is the ostrich phase, which is not exactly denying a disability, but not really fully realizing its impact. This is where you're going to find most parents. And you may have heard the phrase used quite often that the family is in denial. And that's something that I really try to steer clear of, because it's not that families are necessarily in denial of the delay or the disability. They just don't understand how it's going to change the educational path that they thought that their child might be on. So really making sure that we're using, positive language and really thinking about how this might be affecting the family. Number 2 is special designation, where the parents begin to realize that their child has some special needs and they're seeking out help. So hopefully this comes quickly after the first step, and you can be there to really help the family. So then number 3, we have normalization. This is where parents try to make the differences between their child and others without disabilities less obvious, right? So we might see that when you've got other families or other children in the family, if a parent comes to work in the classroom and they're just trying to know, like, oh, my child can do the same things as this child. So, and realizing that this is very normal part of the process and being there to offer support. Now, step 4 is self-actualization, and this is where the parents view their child as just different, and while supporting and advocating for their child, making sure that they have everything that. So this is the stage that we really want to help all families get to. It might be a longer process than we envision for some, but parent volunteering is really a great way to help families see firsthand how their child might interact differently than other children, or that they may be struggling with something. Because for many families, the experiences they have with young children might only be their one child or two children or three. So being in, an educational environment and being able to see what's really going on with their child is going to be really helpful for families to get through these 4 levels of awareness as quickly. And of course, you need to be there to help support them along the way. So again, we're building on that trust. We're offering more support. We need to make sure that, number one, the families need to know that their child's teacher has the child's interest in mind. So we never want to come across as, your child is a disruption, or I can't handle the way that your child does this or that, or your child is going to hurt another child, or things like that. So that's really just putting a negative approach on how the child interacts in an educational environment. That's going to really be difficult for a family to hear and not see you as having their child's best interest. So what we want to make sure that we're doing is, when we address the issues that the child's having in the classroom, making sure that we know that they may be having a hard time, but we're here to help them to do better and to help the family do better, and whatever they need to make that happen. We know that families are going to have lots of questions. Okay, and you might not have all of the answers. I know I never had all of the answers. It's okay to not have the answers, but don't just leave them with an I don't know. You can always say, I'm going to help you find this out. And this is where I look for information. Great to have lots of resources lined up to give families. There's great websites out there or other organizations that can really help them. So making sure we have all that. And then some families might want ideas to help work with their children at home. So as we get further along in the process, you can get more ideas, but the first thing that you can do is, like I said, with that ages and stages questionnaire, if you're using one of those, it comes with ideas to help children practice these developmental skills at home. So you can have that ready to go, and as soon as the assessments have been finished, you're sharing results, you have some resources right here to start day 1. That's going to help the family know that you've got their back, that you care about their child, and that you're going above and beyond to make sure they have everything that they need. It's really important. And teachers really need to be prepared to help with the next step. So this is where it's going to get maybe a little bit tricky, because each state, each program might have a different twist, a different spin on this process, but I'm going to explain to you what my process was, and we're going to talk about some different ideas of what it might look like for you. The referral process. All right, so families are going to come to you. They're going to say, well, should I see my pediatricians? Should I see this specialist? Should I go to my local school district? Where do I go for the next step in the process? So it's really important that you know all of the resources that are available in your specific area, and then that you know the laws in your state that are regarding services. So for a pediatrician, many children under the age of 3 can go to a pediatrician and get hooked up with services in their area. They might need some help with speech. They may need some help with physical development, and their local pediatrician, their family pediatrician, can help steer them in the right direction. Here in Michigan, where I am, we have the Children's Hospital that's really close to us, with lots of specialists that have lots of different services right there. You just need to help them kind of find out, if they're covered and how that would work for them. But we also can use 0 to 3, that's nationally. Here in Michigan, we also use early on. So those are all for young children, and that's going to help them get different services for whatever it is that they need, whether it be speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, any kinds of therapy that can help that child with the developmental delay. They'll be able to get it through a pediatrician if they're under the age of 3. But again, that's me here in Michigan. So you'll need to do your own research to see exactly what you need to do in your area. Different specialist. I have a private therapy that I always take my students to here in Michigan, my college students, and we do a full tour and they give us tons of information. It's called Building Bridges. And it's a great center. It's huge and it's beautiful. And they offer physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, ABA therapy, so many different types of therapy all in one beautiful building. So if a child needs more than one service, they can get it all in one place. All of the doctors, therapists, and service members meet together. They can work together, work with the family. It's a wonderful program. The one downfall is they don't accept Medicaid. So for me, working with children in Head Start, where our program was a majority of children in poverty, this isn't somewhere that I would want to send my families for them to go and find out that services for their child could cost them thousands every month. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. Your school district is only for children that are over the age of 3. And again, that's here in Michigan. Over the age of 3, our local school districts are required to offer services to children, whatever they need. So they do their own assessments there, and they will decide what kinds of therapies children qualify for. Okay, so let's break it down. The difference here between this IFSP and the IEP. The IFSP is the Individualized Family Support Plan, and this is for children that are ages 0 to 3. The IEP is an individualized education plan, and this is for children 3 and above, but it can go on past the age of 18, so it varies by state. So children that have severe special needs, they can go into their 20s through an IEP and receive services by their school district with no cost to the family. So each plan should refer to the family for better understanding of the child's strengths and then for goal setting. So plans should include accommodations if needed. That's called the 504 plan. A little bit more about the IFSP. So one guiding principle of the ISP is that the family is the child's greatest resource. So young children's needs are closely tied to the needs of his or her family. The best way to support children and meet their needs is to support and build upon the individual strengths of the family. So the IFSP is a whole family plan with parents as major contributors of its development. Involvement of other team members will really depend on what the child needs. Other team members can be agencies, medical, therapists, child development specialists, social workers, and others. The written IFSP addresses not only the needs of the infant, but also the strengths and the needs of the family related to enhancing the development of their child. So going beyond the IEP model, where goals are often based on professionals' perceptions of the family's needs, the IFSP approach challenges professionals to develop practices that allow families to assess their own needs and encourage collaborative goal setting. So you really professionals work hand on hand with families to see what kinds of goals do we have. So we're looking at young children that maybe aren't walking yet, aren't crawling yet, aren't speaking yet. So we look at what kind of strengths do you have in your family. Maybe grandmother also lives in the home. So let's make sure she's involved in it and making sure the whole family sits down together and makes a really great plan for their family. And it's going to be very specific for their family and addresses everything that's going on in the home and everything that's going on with the child. So I mentioned some physical needs, but it can also be speech, and we can see all different types of needs. So again, I said here in Michigan, we have early on, their motto is don't worry, but don't wait. So we really push for each and every family that if you have any concerns, make sure you reach out for an assessment. But also 0 to 3 is a wonderful organization that connects families to therapists and social workers that can come into the family and work with children. The IEP meeting, something that you'll want to know as an education provider is that preschool teachers can come to the IEP meetings, and I think really should go to the IEP meetings. I went as often as possible. Of course, staffing shortages were an issue here and there, and I'm sure they will be for most of you as well. But whenever you're able to go to the IEP meeting and go in with the family and let them know that here I am, I'm on your side, I'm offering another level of support. I want to make sure that the school district knows your child the way I know your child, the way you know your child. And being able to sit down and really discuss progress that the children are making in your classroom, that's going to make a world of difference to that family. Let me tell you, an IEP meeting, if you've never been to one, can be very intimidating for a parent. There is usually many professionals that will come in with lots of data and very many forms that need to be signed and dated. So making sure that the family knows that you're there for them to help support them is a wonderful level to that component. And now that we are all getting so much better at using Zoom and other forms of technology, maybe even just trying to be part of a meeting virtually if you can't physically be there because you need to be in your classroom. I think that would be a great idea for anyone to take on. So the IEP meeting should cover over these aspects. So we're talking about PLOP, that's the present level of performance. So we're going to write down a statement about the level of academic and functional performance. So that's going to look different depending on what kind of assessments your school district gives the child. But it's based on data and observations. So, and it can come from lots of different team members. This is a great time to be able to be there and to speak up for that student of yours and, give some input on what that child does in your classroom, because they're not going to be able to see everything just from a short assessment. Then we have annual goals. So the IEP's main purpose is to set goals for the children throughout the year. And it's usually they are annual goals that meet every year. They need to be measurable. They need to be tailored specifically to the child. And then if you're working in a program that's state or federally funded, like the Head Start program was, then it was really important that we use those IEP goals in our lesson planning. So, we had some professional development, some training opportunities to really look at what IEPs look like from different school districts and how we can take their goals and put them into our lesson plans using our curriculum. So I think that's really important. But even if you're not in, a program that's regulated in that way, I think that it's really important if you can show a family, this is how I took that annual goal from, Jimmy's IEP meeting, and we're working on that this week when we do, our morning greeting or our circle time or when we're at the science center. So think about how that would make a family member feel to know that, you're thinking about their child and you're thinking about how you can address those goals that have been set for them. I think that's really going to help build on that relationship to another level. The IEP also has individualized supports and services. So the team discusses how well your child's accommodations, modifications, and specialized instruction are working. Or, you can have ideas for how they might work in the future. And then you get some updates and support services that match your child's clock and the new goals each year. So those are some things that you can find in a typical IEP meeting. So once we've gathered all this information, we've went through all of these steps. Now you get back into your classroom, and now we've got to make it all work, because that child with whatever special needs is going to be an inclusive member of your classroom. So how are you going to make your classroom function better? How are you going to make sure that not only are you teaching Jimmy, but you're teaching Jimmy to the best of your ability, and all of the other members of your classroom or your teaching staff is doing the same? So you want to look over that IEP or the IFSP. You're looking at those goals and you're incorporating them as much as you can. You want to make sure that you're giving tips to mom, feedback to dad, whatever the family members makeup is, making sure that you've got some good, consistent communication on what those goals were and what kind of progress you've made from day to day. So that's something that we need to think about as well. As soon as Jimmy meets that IEP goal, you want to tell the family, you want to celebrate it with them and make sure that they feel that accomplishment. But then you need to also think, is your classroom truly ready? What kind of special needs are the children in your classroom facing? Is the furniture accessible? Do you have different materials for children, with some fine motor delays or gross motor delays or any other physical delays? What can you do to help children that are nonverbal? Do you have visual cues? So that's going to look different depending on the children that you have in your classroom and what their special needs are. But really making sure that you have that the ability to have new materials or to make new materials, and seeing how your program works with things like this to make sure that we're addressing all of those. You're going to want to look over your activity plans or lesson plans and your daily routine. You're going to know, is Jimmy really struggling with my morning circle time? Is it, too long? Is it too short? Is there something that Jimmy needs in order to be more successful in this part of the day? And that's going to change throughout the school year. Some days it's going to be totally different than others. And each month, as you progress with those goals, you're going to see things change, and you might have to make different adjustments throughout the year. But you also need to know, what might the family need? So this is part of your ongoing communication. You want to talk with families. You want to see how they're doing, what they need. Do they need more support with the school district, more support at home, more support at school? And then always thinking, can your program offer more? Again, what kind of resources are available in your area? That's going to be your homework as an educator for the rest of your life. You're always going to be wanting to see what is available for children and families in my area, what changes from day to day and year to year. So that's something to always be looking over as well. All right, so we're talking about environment, routines, peers, noise, materials. I already kind of touched on quite a few of these, but we want to make sure that your classroom furnishings are making sure that they're okay for children with visual or physical disabilities. So that's something to think about. If you have a child that's suffering from blindness, making sure that they can maneuver around the room to different learning centers by themselves and give them as much independence as possible. You want to make sure that materials are all within reach. You're watching out for classroom clutter, unstable flooring, so rugs that move easily, or things that could make it inaccessible for some children. Making a predictable routine for your classroom, and then using visual supports, pictures, props to teach the children the routine, help them stay engaged, and aid in transitioning between different activities. I know this could always be a hot spot for some of the children that I worked with that had autism. So a big transition that is unexpected can be really difficult for children with autism. So making sure that you have different visual aids to assist them with that. The peers. So peers who do not have disabilities can model positive pro-social and communication skills, demonstrate routines that young children with disabilities can imitate. But classmates can also help children to develop relationships, increase their motivation to be part of those classroom activities. We also want to make sure that you use peers as a positive experience to make sure that they're growing empathy for all children, especially children with disabilities, and just making sure that they know that we want diversity in our classroom and in our world, and that we celebrate different abilities, and that not everyone is the same. Quick story, I had a little boy many years ago who had a feeding tube that was hooked onto his stomach, and the family was really concerned about if they would be able to be part of the classroom or not. And we worked it out, and we were able to do it. We wrote an IEP with some modifications for medical The mother came into the classroom and helped with the feeding tube to make sure that we didn't have any issues. And the children in my classroom that year really gained so much by able to making friendships with a child that was different than them, with a medical disability that they had never seen or heard about before, and really learning a lot about it. It sparked so much engagement. We spent a lot of time on the digestive system and talking about stomachs and intestines, and we really did a lot of work that year based on these things, because the students really cared about that child, and they developed real, healthy, important friendships with a child that was just a little bit different. So making sure that we see the best in all children and really support them to have those positive pro-social relationships. Noise, so we want to talk about noise, and I'm also going to say the lights in the classroom. So we want to make sure that those are things that are working well. I used to switch out my lights for blue lights. Noise, we just kind of take things down a little bit to make sure that children were able to handle it. And that was children with autism, children with hearing disabilities, and making sure nonverbal children can always, kind of work on that. And then materials. So we've got modifying materials in the classroom has a big impact on independence. So if you're working with the school district, really trying to work on making sure somebody is helping to get these materials. We don't really want to put it all on the parents to try to get it for them to do. So, gluing small knobs to puzzles can make it really easy to pick up. So, really just looking for little tidbits that can make it easier for children and families. And so the families can feel like their child is really part of your class. Okay, so the last piece of this was meaningful inclusion in early childhood. And this is just a small video that I got from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. And it really just shows, children working in a really great early childhood environment that has inclusion. They're doing inclusion with purpose. And, it talks to the families a little bit too. So really thinking about, how the families feel during this process and making sure that we're there to support them. So I'm going to hit play, and I hope that that is just going to work and we don't have any issues. If we do, please let me know.
I felt nervous, very nervous. I was with them full time, and then to hand him over is nerve-wracking.
Mostly fear of the unknown. I didn't know how we would fare in a classroom setting with all those typically developing kids, and then how we would understand those instructions and those lessons that are being taught by the teachers.
In early childhood, every classroom is an inclusive classroom. Whether you're talking about children with abilities or just children that have had different life experiences up until this point. You look at your environment differently, and how is the environment accessible to every child? And how is your environment set up so that every child is getting exactly what they need?
Our mission and vision statement are anchored in high expectations and outcomes for all students. So living that out at the early childhood level, that was the work.
I think it all starts with that IEP process. So really having that evaluation team and the current team writing those functional goals and objectives. My goal is that services such as speech, OT, PT, all those could be embedded right within the classroom and the routines that we have.
When you are an early childhood kid between 3 and 5 years old, you want to do what your friends are doing, and to have children the expectation that they're going to sit and do one specific thing at any given time that you choose doesn't always work out. But when it's an itinerant model, having those service providers coming into the environment, working with kids doing things that kids are naturally doing is in the best interest of kids.
We used to have our kids that are the kids in in childcare, and then our kids with IEPs that were joining that group. So it kind of starting out to meeting those needs more individually, which has really turned into all that joint ownership. All kids belong, both reg ed and special ed teacher and therapists too, that we all are a team for every child.
I think teachers learn from other teachers. And so when you have special education people in there, whether it's an OT or a PT or a speech person or just a special education teacher, they are modeling different behaviors or using different words that as the regular ed teacher, you can listen and go, oh, I may be able to use that with another child.
He's learning in class. He's engaged in class. He has relationships.
Before, we were like thinking maybe we're going to be there for the rest of our lives to support him with all the needs that he got. But we are so happy to see that he can really do the things that he can do right now. Those skills has developed so much. He can truly create something wonderful, and that really makes us very proud.
I think what we know now is that there are more questions than there are answers, and to be open to every opportunity that you are given to learn and to develop always what's in the best interest of the child, and to give them those opportunities to show you what they need and to listen to them.
It makes me really optimistic for his future. You know, I used to worry a lot about, would he fit in? Would he get picked on? How would his classroom environment be? But he has become quite the popular guy at school. So he comes into class, and I can't even tell you how many kids hug him. He has true friendships, true relationships in class, and he brings a special just energy to his class, and it's positive for his classmates too to see that.
I hope inclusion promotes awareness to those typically developing kids that there are other kids like our son that need support as they try to learn their way through life.
There's a softness there. There's an empathy there that I see in his peers. So we didn't expect that, but we love it.
We know that young children need a variety of rich experiences with all of their peers. And we also know that not only children with, but those without disabilities benefit from inclusive environments. Wisconsin's vision, every child a graduate, college and career ready, is not possible unless our children with disabilities have the opportunity for meaningful participation in their classrooms, in their schools, and in their communities. Now is the time to get past the hurdles. Whether you work in private or public school settings, in center or family-based childcare, Head Start, or special education services, every one of us will be able to take great joy in making a difference for our kids and their families. As you move toward inclusive environments, if you are in need of assistance, feel free to contact the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. We'd be more than happy to help. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and so now we have a few minutes for questions. I'm sorry I talked a little bit longer than I was supposed to. That's something that I typically do.